you ready for us? Amazing. Thank you for showing up. I know most of you probably got stuck in traffic, but you came on time. We really appreciate it. My name is Butheina Kazim. I'm the founder of Cinema Akil, and I'm really, really thrilled to be here sharing space with the founders of Azeema. I have with me Jamil Al Faki, the editor in chief and creative director and founding director, Eva Husseini, the co director, senior editor, arts and culture, Sania Arshad, sorry, co-director, deputy editor, social media and production. And is that correct? Did I miss something else? Sorry? That's right. Okay. So, I mean, if you obviously, you're here, Azeema, you've read, you followed their work, and there's a few, a few associations that come to mind, or a few specializations that I kind of think of when I think of the work that you do, whether it's your focus on the Wanasa region, whether it's your focus on non-binary representation, grassroots work and independent work, and your focus on the global majority. And I want to sort of hear from you, outside of what I've read and what I follow and what I'm fangirling over, how you define your work, how you define yourselves, and how do you define your practice. Whoever wants to take it first.
Big question to start with. I think each of us would define our work within Azeema differently, but I think we all have the same goal, which is to amplify and share voices and make sure that the representation of women and non-binary folk is at the forefront of what we do. Yeah, I don't know where to start. It's like massive
Maybe
question.
we start with like top line, what we do. And
Yeah.
So essentially we're a print and digital magazine. We have like multiple sections. And then we also have a creative agency, which kind of branches off into Azeema FM, which is like our music hub, where we kind of spotlight artists. We do events, we do music programming, like loads of stuff to kind of champion and celebrate artists from the regions that we cover. What else do we do?
we have a print magazine.
Yeah, print magazine. We do consulting. We do events and workshops and all kind of fun stuff, parties. Yeah.
And what brings you to Dubai at Soul DXB?
So actually we were invited here last year and we had a booth, and this year we just wanted to do something different with Soul. We always view Soul as like the older guy versions of us. I was going to say uncles, but I think that's a bit rude.
I don't think they like that.
They're not here. So.
But no uncles. Yeah.
But yeah, working with them is really great and an honor. So we're here.
I guess the thing that, other than definitions, right, and talking in depth about, because your work is your work and it's a universe, and every universe sort of takes different shapes at different moments, is I'm kind of interested in you as individuals. How did you come together? How did you get to know each other? What were the shared kind of frustrations and the shared celebrations that you wanted to bring to life and that you've been doing with Azeema since you started?
I guess I'll jump in. So Azeema was started as a project. It was a final major project at university. And me and Sania lived together and were also friends, which was the catalyst for us to kind of begin working together. And that came very early on with the release of the first issues and the first project. And I think it was widely received very well. So it was beautiful that people resonated with the work and felt that there was a need for representation in this area, especially being based in London. It wasn't something that was particularly well represented at the time. So I think that was pretty much the catalyst for its origins, and also wanting to connect with others through imagery and sharing stories. And then we met the wonderful Eva out on a panel talk, actually. That was the first time we met.
So I was curating an exhibition with an incredible friend called Georgina Johnson, and she programmed myself because in my outside of Azeema, I'm an artist and I do other work as well. So we were put on a panel together, and yeah, we just connected. And a few months later, they slid in my DMs and they were like, "Hey, we want you part of the team." Yeah, it was quite cute and organic. Like, we just built a friendship from the panel talk, and then eventually we realized that we can work together as well.
Yeah, I think it was nice because we realized we all had shared passions for the work that we do, and within storytelling, whether it be through visuals or through interviews or through the music work that we do, it's all very much connected. And that was pretty much the reason for us coming together and wanting to do this, and share our voices together.
Yeah, I think also because all of us, as individuals, we have our own practice where we also experience what it's like as non-white women in London, what it's like working in the creative industry. I think that helps us in terms of shared experiences and how we translate that into the work that we do at Azeema. It allows us to prioritize people who are like us and give those opportunities that maybe sometimes we lack.
Definitely.
I want to come back to that, but Sanaya, I wanted to ask if you had.
I was just going to say mine. So yeah, obviously me and Jam lived together, and I think for me, like we both grew up in Nottingham, and I was very disconnected from my culture, because what I saw of it in Nottingham I didn't really like, and also like growing up like in school and stuff, I was mainly surrounded by my white friends. So there wasn't much like South Asian kind of representation around me, and I didn't really feel close to it. And then coming to London, like going to uni and then being around everyone in Azeema, it's just kind of made me find like my family kind of thing. So I think it was one of like a finding identity kind of thing for me.
Same for me, really. Obviously, I'm mixed race. I'm half Sudanese. I'm half English, and yeah, I think it was the same for me. I didn't feel like I had much connection to my culture, and I really wanted to explore that and find other people who had similar backgrounds. And through my photography and through visual storytelling, that's kind of how it's come to light. But yeah, again, grew up in Nottingham, and it's not as diverse as London, and it has a lot of issues and problems, and it's a lot different in London, and I think it's helped to kind of build that community.
I mean, one thing I'm trying to place is when this actually happened and how it is in relation to where we are today. So
right. So the first issue and the final major project happened in 2017, and I think it was released the 4th of May, 2017.
Okay, so now Azeema is much bigger. Your team is about 12 people
in the wider team. This 12.
Wider team, yeah.
So you're everywhere. You're here. You're in Dubai. You're doing work with a lot of different collaborators. How has your kind of departure point, or that thing that really brought you together, that original gel, that almost combat really against a specific personal experience, but also a larger experience that you wanted to project? This mosquito is coming for us.
It's coming for us over here.
Like how has it changed and shifted over the years, and what really remains the same, and frustratingly so, but also I guess reassuringly so.
Yeah. I think naturally things change over time, and we released 4 print issues over the course of how many years? 4 years, maybe longer. And I think naturally we found a way to survive, as it's difficult making print, and I think we put a lot of our energy in the print, and it's a beautiful book.
It's like
almost.
A coffee table.
Yeah,
book.
it's a huge book. So to sustain this, and to keep things as high quality with our stories and our reach and everything, it's like we had to find a way to sustain ourselves as a business, and that's also got its challenges. So we pivoted into having the creative agency in 2020 to help us put money back into the things we wanted to do, and also to sustain ourselves, as we know that we're living in a climate which is very difficult when it comes to the cost of living, and our own backgrounds. So that's very important as well, to make sure we've got a strong foundation in that.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry.
The question was kind of looking back at the evolution, right? Now you're more than you're hitting almost almost a decade, right? So that's quite, and not to that has different chapters, and obviously you mentioned 2020 as sort of a pivotal turning point, and that obviously being a big shift in terms of the future of of publishing and of digital publishing and the sector that you're into, but really looking back at the origin story, there's the sort of the camaraderie, the sisterhood, the commonality that you shared, and how it has changed over the past 7 years.
So to touch on that, I think when we started, there wasn't much representation in media specifically. I think at the time, I'm sure you guys all know, Galdem was a magazine in London. And that was kind of like one of the, I guess, pioneers of like independent publishing for people of color as such. But I think over time, over the last 6 years, there's been a huge kind of shift in the number of different media platforms and publications. And the representation, especially in the UK, I guess, is a lot higher, which is amazing. But at the same time, saying that a lot of these publications are not able to sustain themselves. So, like, for example, Galdem has recently closed, which is really, really sad. And I think there's just like an overwhelming kind of pressure and a lot of challenges that media publications like us face in that sense.
I think also it's just like in terms of the progress and how it's changed from when we started to now, is that we're still growing as we're still learning and growing as we're going, and we take our shared experiences working with institutions, working with different brands, collaborating with different people. We take those experiences and continue to grow from that. A lot of it is just sort of going with the flow and going, just learning as we're going.
I guess we have to kind of adapt as we go, and we each time we have to learn something new for us then to grow a bit more or expand a bit more. And like we've all had to learn everything ourselves. No one told us how to make a magazine. No one told us how to make a creative agency.
How to do finances.
How to do finances. Nobody taught us how to do any of that. So I think sometimes we have to cut ourselves a bit of slack and just really, celebrate the fact that we're still here.
And I think that goes back to access and what access is available to women who aren't indigenous to English Britain, and how do they what is available there to allow them to grow.
Can you talk specifically about that? Like, how does that actually play out, right? You do this project at university, you come together, you find the right partners, you set out to challenge the status quo, with what you're doing with Azeema. What are the actual barriers that you start to face from the get-go?
I mean, the obvious one is financial, because, we want to be able to sustain ourselves whilst also, building and creating things for other people. And that is one of the biggest challenges. But also it's education of, how to even sustain ourselves as internally as a business and as a collective. That's really difficult. And we don't have, it's not, unless you really seek it out, there are some programs in which that are aimed to help you, but you have to really, really hunt them down and get onto these programs to learn.
I think so. That's entrepreneurship, right? That's cultural entrepreneurship, and that's banging your head against the wall and trying to learn things that you had no idea how to do. Whether it's offset printing techniques, or it's like you said, Excel spreadsheets and models that you haven't had access to. But then you talk, Eva, specifically about the positionality, right, and the departure point of the perspective that you're trying to put out there. That even in your description, like I thought it was very poignant. Like your short definition is Azeema is brave, strong, and courageous. And I kept wondering, what makes it so hard? Why does it require this level of tenacity? And what are the things that you encounter?
I think the whole point is to create an alternative system the creative system in the industry right now is extremely exclusive. It's segregated. It creates invisibility. We're trying to create a community where none of that exists. With that, there's always going to be challenges because how do you like capture being unbothered by the current system? Like, it's really, really hard. But trying to be unbothered is what allows you to trying to be unbothered by the current system is what allows you to create the alternative. And it's, like I said, it's a learning progress as we're going, because the tools and the knowledge isn't there for us to access as easily. So it's just about just going with it, just knowing that the intention is to elevate voices, experiences, stories, practice by people from the whole world who isn't basically white.
I think with that, though, with the platform that we've kind of built, we do as well have to kind of challenge, I guess, for example, specifically with the creative agency, we work with a lot of big brands and corporations that are mostly kind of white-owned by men. So a lot of the time, these brands are interested in working with us and stuff, but they don't want to create a relationship that lasts a long time, essentially. They don't want to maintain or sustain a relationship with us. And a lot of the time, I think we do have to kind of call them out on situations or things that we don't agree with. Or
I definitely want to get to that, because that's a whole can of worms as to how you navigate collaborations. We were talking about collaborations, yesterday, but I'm curious specifically, like, what's the first kind of departure point or sort of ricochet effect from that starting position of wanting to start this publication, and where do you first encounter that resistance? Is it the invisibility at large that you're combating, right? So you're trying to, push a narrative and put forward a different visibility and a different lens, and it's just that, there's an overwhelming majority of lack of representation? Or is it specific interactions, access to funding, access to investors or mentors, or even even capital? Like, where does it start, I guess?
I mean, it's literally everything that you just pointed out, but I just want to say also that it's not just entirely negative. Like, we've been able to create opportunities for women from these regions, and women and non-binary folk from these regions who otherwise wouldn't have been given these opportunities. So every single shoot that we have is an entire team of women, and women from West Asia. The global majority. Every single project that we work on, it's all women and non-binary folk. Like, we're able to provide these opportunities and create these spaces as a result of that point of departure, of it starting with Jamila's uni project, and it developing into something that's now public, and the audience have reacted well to it. They enjoy that space. They want that space because they know that there isn't much space elsewhere.
But now you're in the position of being in that place, right? You are in the position of being able to make the decisions, choose your artistic direction, choose your collaborators, choose your talent, all of that, right? But somebody had to champion you, right? Or you had to fight against something. So I'm curious about, how do you even start? Because there's maybe folks in the audience that, are also setting out to do something similar, to challenge, and, and especially now, we're seeing how much work there still is to do, despite it being the global majority, despite it being a place where, as you rightly said, there is more representation, but the work is not even nearly done. Yeah. So how do you begin?
I think you start by doing, you start by making, and you don't necessarily think about what the outcome is going to be. You just make, and that's exactly what I did. I just kind of made, and wasn't really sure about what the response would be, and that's still what we do. We just make, and we create things for others. We're alternative press, we're alternative media. We, essentially have made our own rules, and by not playing by the rules, sometimes that is a bit tricky because we don't fit in certain categories or certain boxes. We kind of slide about a little bit, but in that way, we still manage to maintain our integrity in that sense.
I think as well, as you were saying with, oh my God, my mind has just gone blank. But essentially, our community representation is what was missing. So that's why the community has responded so well, because that representation was now there. And that's kind of what's kept us going, I guess, yeah.
I want to circle back to what you were talking about in terms of, dive deeper, I guess, into. And I want to read this because we're talking about representation. We're constantly talking about representation, and the work that I do with the cinema, it is very much about representation and making sure that whether it's a classic film, a repertory film, or the canon, is being challenged. It's very much about putting our stories front and center, and I use "our" with a capital O, right? I guess I want to hear from you. How whether you think that the needle has shifted, whether there is a recognition of the global majority being the global majority. Have we really moved past the status quo of tokenization and the diversity checklist, or are we really still a long way from the accuracy, I guess, rather than diversity?
Yeah, I feel like it has moved a lot, but it's still a lot of work to be done, and that's why it's important that spaces like Azeema does exist, and the same for many other publications and spaces that do the same or similar work. I think there's always room for improvement, and there's always space.
But I think also it's important to recognize that this representation is different depending on the region.
Yeah, for sure.
The landscape here is always going to be different to what the landscape is like in London, and how we experience it being in London.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming maybe your experience is probably different to us living here in Dubai, where you see people who look like you constantly.
Yeah.
And those people are also in the positions, whether it's at a brand or in an institution, they hold those positions as well. And so I don't know, maybe that collaboration is easier. I don't know, maybe
you deal with different dynamics. You deal with inherited. It's something, we were listening to a panel yesterday together at the at Al Circal Avenue, and we taught. One of the speakers touched on the idea of the colonial kind of lens that we've inherited. So yes, you're in the context where you are seeing people in decision-making positions, or you are interacting regularly with diversities within your own community, but you're still inheriting moving images or static images that don't look like you. And that was my experience with the cinema, is that you still have images on the big screen that do not look like the people that are sitting in the audience. So what I'm wondering is, where do you encounter those challenges? How do you even navigate this idea of operating and speaking to an audience in London and talking to that shared frustration, versus when you come here and do something that is in this context and trying to kind of come to terms with it?
I think the work that we do transcends localities. I think obviously language is something that can potentially be a barrier, but at the same time we share a lot of imagery as well, and I think sometimes imagery speaks a lot louder than words perhaps, and I think that's what's beautiful about Azeema. It's both got words and images, and we create our own images, and not many publications have the resources or access to be able to create their own images, so which in a sense gives us a sense of power in that we can create our own narrative of what we want to represent, and that's something that's important to me as an individual, and I'm sure for Sanaya and Eva as well, is and that we bring that into the work that we do.
She just reminded me of an interaction that we had recently when we were in Utrecht for a festival that we were participating in there, and someone that we worked with called Hannah Al-Sisi, she is collaborating with a platform called Verso to gather all of the instances where people have maybe lost their job or been silenced as a result of speaking out about Palestine. But she asked us to participate, but we were like, we actually have not experienced any of those things, because we've created a platform where we can speak about any injustice without facing repercussions, because from the start we created a platform where that was the point. This is why we exist, to be able to create a space where each individual can exist for themselves in a multidimensional way. And so when she asked us, we were like, actually, we haven't experienced that, because at Azeema, we can speak about these things, and no one will tell us to shut the fuck up, because we won't.
And as you shouldn't. And safeguarding your editorial choices, or your ethos is very much a privilege of sustainability. And I want to talk a little bit about that sustainability. How did you structure Azeema in a way where you were able to actually weather the storm, whether it's the COVID storm, or whether it's changes in the industry, in the publishing industry, whether it was also a response to the shifting tides in the need for further representation, whether it's under the guise of tokenization or not, but whether you saw an opportunity there, and how you structured your setup to be able to continue to have you be working there 7 years later.
I mean, as we said, we're still learning things as we go along. So I think there's an element of the fact that we're still babies as a company. So there's still a lot for us to sort out and for us to kind of work through. And, but I think at the heart of it, we know that we've got this great platform to champion, and with the online stories and, the outfaces that we have, we make sure that we put everything into that.
What are things that you think are still missing that you really want to work on? Whether it's a completely new venture, or things that you really feel are gaps in the way that representation takes place.
I think something that we've spoken about quite often is just, I think the dream is to be able to have the luxury to actually move forward with any project that we come up with. So like if we think of an idea and we want to create a film, actually being able to create that film. Like Jamila said, we're still growing, and the business is still growing, and as a result, we're still relying quite a lot on collaborations and brand partnerships and things like that to be able to sustain.
But the dream is for us to not be so reliant on that, one day. And I think to be able to create and just not worry about, financial repercussions would be great. I know that's probably a dream, but
if you figure that one out, please let me know.
Yeah, I will share that with you for sure. But yeah, I think there's loads of things we want to do. We'd love to make another print at some point, but they take ages and cost a lot, so we may not be making one just yet. But there are loads of things we want to expand on. We want to work on our Azeema FM. We want to make sure that we're doing more with that, and also Azeema TV.
And more like international stuff as well. Like we love traveling. We love meeting the communities outside of London. So it'd be amazing if we could do more.
Definitely.
I definitely want to come back to that, because I'm curious how, how that sort of journey has been of taking Azeema out of its comfort zone. Not that it's been very comfortable, but go back to the kind of model, right? So how much of your work focuses on collaborations? How do you go about them? What kind of collaborations do you seek out? How much of them, come to you? And what sort of, of brands actually are interested in the work that you do?
Yeah. I think collaboration comes into pretty much every point of Azeema, because we have, collaborations with writers for online. We have collaboration as us as a team. We have collaboration when it comes to us making shoots for the magazine. And, whether that's working with stylists or art directors or set designers and making something together. And the same with the people that we work with the agency. It's sometimes we get a lot of repeat customers and clients, which is great. And in a way, we've kind of built a relationship with certain brands. And I think it's great to try and continue those whilst also trying to make new clients as well.
Well, because you said you hope to get to a point where you're not reliant anymore, right?
Yeah.
On these collaborations. And what is it about that you would like to be rid of? Is it the financial kind of, dependence? Is it the restrictions editorially?
It's more the fact that when we work with clients, it's transactional. And of course it is, because they want something from us.
And what do they want from you?
In return, we're making something for them.
They want
the
people.
culture. They want the access to our community. It might be that they want consultation on something that they're unsure of, and by working with us, we provide authenticity and care of community when we're working with them. So by working with us, I think it's like a safe thing to do in a way, because we're not going to do a bad job.
But also, when we work with these brands, a lot of the time we're kind of restricted or limited to what we can do. Like, we all have such crazy ideas sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like our ideas don't align with these brands and their vision and their platform.
And
so
they're
it's
not
like a
ready
lot of
for
the time
it.
we have to rein it back in so it fits with their brand.
What do you mean when they're not ready for it? Like, what kind of things
I mean,
are we
I'm
not
not
ready
gonna-
for now?
Yeah.
Without naming a specific brand.
Yeah.
Said brand is not ready
said
for.
brand is not ready. We worked with quite a big client a few years ago, and obviously we were super grateful for the experience to do that. But it was challenging because what we presented, we did not think was radical in any way. We thought this was just our community. This is what they wear. This is their traditional dress, and we received pushback that all the territories of where this is going to be published will not receive this well, and they were fearful of it being published, and we completely disagreed because we were like, well, a sari is nothing to be afraid of.
It's our everyday life. And
every
if you
day.
want us, like, this is what you get.
Yeah. So they weren't ready, and that's okay. But so we'll keep working. That's why it's important for us to put someone wearing a sari on the front cover, or that's important.
What are people still fearful of the most in your experience?
Brown people.
I think it just goes back to the element of tokenization. For them, it's just a hype. Like it happened when Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd caused an uproar in the US, and lots of institutions started doing, I don't know, messages, and we're gonna do better, and ratata yappa yappa. It was just full of shit, and we see it and we experience it all the time. And I think when we get emails in our inbox, and we can often tell whether it's something genuine or not, and that's it. It becomes like a choice of, do we work with them? Do we sort of help them do better, or do we just say no because we know that they're just going to tokenize us and extract from us, exploit us?
How do you navigate that? I mean, that's always a tricky one, right?
Yeah.
You are dependent on them and those collaborations to a large degree on your livelihood and your sustainability. At the same time, how do you even start to create that criteria? It's not like you can run it through a calculator and figure out, what, this is like 70%, bias, so we're not going to kick this one out.
Sometimes it just comes down to the brief, and we'll look at the brief and be like, okay, they're asking for this, they're asking for that. How do we feel about that? And then if it feels weird, then we're usually like, don't know about that.
So intuition?
Intuition, and also just how we think it's going to be presented. And if it feels like it's going to be presented in a way that we're not comfortable with, then we shut it down quickly.
And also, if it's not benefiting our community, then why are we actually doing this project?
Yeah.
So it's taken those questions into account.
And it's been a learning process with it as well. Like, there's been things that which we felt a bit uncomfortable with in the end, and it's learning from that and then not repeating it for the next time we do it, or even valuing our services, and being like, okay, well, actually, we deserve to be paid this for working on this project, because that's what our white counterparts would get double the amount for, so it's there's that as well.
I think as well, sometimes we need to kind of remember that we have this platform, and we need to kind of get into these brands, build a relationship with them, and then we can be like, you need to change this, and this, and this.
Yeah, you always have to go round and change it from the inside.
So working with the belly of the beast is sort of still something you have to do. Are there things that you say straight? Sometimes you don't even go there.
Yeah, it depends.
And how do you make that decision collectively? Because there's several decision makers. You're all kind of very invested in keeping the integrity. How do you make the call to pull the plug on something, or keep pushing it and hoping to cure the beast?
I think it's like, from the few instances we've had, it's always just conversation.
Yeah, and it's usually just we usually agree if something's not right.
Maybe also shared experience, like or reflecting back on like how have others experienced this institution or brand or person or whoever it is that reaches out, reflecting on that, and if it's quite a negative experience, like a pattern of it, why would we work?
So there is this kind of, this rising right-wing tide against, the policing of publications and representation, and how, we are too polite and too correct. And if anything, right now, given the past, 2 months, but also, as long as, post-colonial histories have played out, that has never really been the case. And I want to just read you, an accurate kind of quote of, Edward Said, who, as fellow comrades, of the image, I want to reflect on something together, and on the specific thesis of Orientalism, proposing the existence of subtle and persistent Eurocentric prejudice against Arabo-Islamic peoples and their culture, which originates from Western culture's long tradition of false, romanticized images of Asia in general and the Middle East in particular. Obviously, this focuses on a specific, geopolitical history and borders, but it extends to the larger space of whether it's, the Wanasa region or even beyond into the global south. And, we're talking earlier about the ruthless genocide that we're witnessing in Palestine, what is happening in Sudan, what is happening in Congo, and, kind of that rivalry of images, right? And we're seeing how very clearly, despite this sort of, almost falsified, fear of policing, we are still living in an era of, propaganda. We are still living in an era where mainstream media still has, and through the algorithm, now even more control over what ends up being given, front and center. So I know it's a very, large pill to swallow, but it is something that we as independent and hopefully continuously independent platforms are navigating. How do you, in these moments, in these kind of reminder, peaks of real confrontation, like how do you even start to question, how do you do things? Do you do things differently? How do you even internally navigate those spaces? I know it's a lot to tackle, but you can take whichever part of it that you resonate with.
I mean, I think that's the resistance in the first place, is that we are in a space that is extremely violent, extremely violating of, if we're talking technology-wise, constantly silencing, policing, all of these elements are so intrinsic in technology in the first place. Technology is always going to be something that is inaccessible to some and accessible to a few. And I think with that, it's, that's I personally think that's the whole point of the resistance is when we share, when we speak, when we protest, when we navigate these occupations, genocides, learning about them, whatever individually path we take to interact with it. I think the whole point is to resist it, essentially, because that's what leads to. I mean, I guess the end goal, that even within Azeema, the end goal is what? Freedom. If representation wasn't an issue, Azeema wouldn't exist. The whole point is that we get to a space where that representation is entirely balanced. There is no Orientalist gaze. There is no white gaze. There is no, heterosexual gaze. Whatever it is, these things don't exist. That's the end goal, right? It's just whether we ever reach it. I don't know. Maybe not in our lifetimes. I don't know. But it's just to keep resisting, I think.
Just sharpening the Azeema in these moments. And how do you then, take that and trickle it down into the community? Yesterday, somebody said something very beautiful in the conversation about الشارع يصحح, which is an experience from the Sudanese revolution, as to, you know, the assumptions as organizers that, you know, that you make, and then, you know, applying that to the street and applying it on ground and being corrected. You know, how do you self-correct, and how do you, whether it's, you know, in the London context and in the West, or in the new places that you kind of navigate as well, and also your personal, you know, experiences.
Yeah, I guess we attempt to handle our, you know, outward-facing platforms with care and with sensitivity. So when, you know, when we are sharing things, we make sure to, you know, be careful with what we're sharing, but also, you know, loudly sharing what we believe in. So there's, you know, having sensitivity, but also, you know, sharing resistance as well. And we make sure that we share things to do with protests, to make sure that people are informed, and, you know, things to do if you may be arrested. And, you know, I feel like we share a lot of information as well.
Just ensuring that circulation is active always, because the people that the Azeema community are usually the ones who maybe are policed the most and face the repercussions of resistance in the first place. And how can we circulate information in an accessible way to ensure the safeguarding of people that participate in this?
And I'd say a lot of our people who interact with us are on Instagram, so that at the moment is our broadcast channel, I suppose, to share this information and to share the things that we're doing.
A lot of times as well, people reach out to us, because I guess us based in the West, in London, and maybe not knowing what's happening elsewhere, people do reach out and they're like, can you talk about this, or can you say something on this? It's like, so we learn a lot from the community, I think, in that aspect.
It's an exchange entirely with the community. It has to be an exchange. If we're, you know, a community-driven platform, the community will always have a part in the work that we do.
And how do you deal with disagreement internally?
Internally,
yeah.
I think again, it just goes back to this element of care and community. I think for me, the disagreement doesn't matter as much if there is growth, and there is always growth. There's always room for growth. And I think that for us, like, I mean, it's been 6 years, you know, disagreements are always going to happen. There's always going to be, I think disagreements are natural. But I think, yeah, it's just about growing together and understanding that collaborative element, and prioritizing community and care in everything, because that's the only way. That's also a resistance in itself, is because we've been taught so often to be individual and capitalistic, and, you know, these are the elements we consume so much in everything that we learn, whether it's in school or through work or collaborating. Even as Azeema, collaborating with brands, you know, we consume so much of those capitalistic elements. So it's just about reining that back in and understanding what's more important, essentially.
I think as well, reminding ourselves that this is much, much, much bigger than us now. This is about the community and the importance of why it was all started in the first place. Just reminding ourselves of those kind of core elements helps.
How do you do that? Where's the North Star? Is there something that you always kind of fall back on?
What was the first sort of manifesto when you did issue 1?
I mean, it's always been that top line. It's been that feeling of strength, and it manifests in all of us in different ways. And I think that's the North Star. And just being able to explore that, really.
I think for me, it's seeing everyone's faces when they come to our events, and being in these like really corporate or like white spaces, and just seeing everyone, like, that brings me so much joy. And I just love it.
Thriving in discomfort is a good place to be. I'm going to open it up to audience intervention, reflections. they're reliant on your faces and your interactions. So please jump in, join us in the conversation with a show of hands. We'll start over there.
I'm just wondering, in terms of what you talked about, not having an Orientalist lens, not having, a patriarchal lens. I feel like there's still a lot of, amongst all of us, I'm sure in like our brown and black bodies and experiences, there's still a lot of bias that we internalize. So how do you go about navigating or kind of like self-critiquing and self-reflecting and making sure that you aren't imposing that bias back into the world through the platform?
I think we try to make sure that we share a diverse range of voices and ethnicities within our work, and also thinking about what it is we're sharing and whether it should be written by somebody who is of the same descent or things like that. I think that also comes into how we approach it. So it's not like that, if that makes sense.
I was just going to say, I think a lot of it is education as well, just really taking the time to kind of learn and check, like double check everything.
Yeah.
And also speak to people who have these experiences, first-hand experiences, rather than reading something off the internet. I think that's so important. I
think also it's something that we are continuously learning about as well, so I wouldn't say we do everything perfectly, but we do our best to make sure that everything is as sensitive as it can be.
I think also it's important to realize that maybe some experiences are pretty biased, and maybe they do fall into that very stereotypical narrative, and that's just the reality of some people's lives. So again, like going back to that notion of exchange, that needs to be constant.
Anyone else? Any reflections on? Any questions you have about how this over there? Great.
Hi, ladies. So in speaking about media and your work in consulting, I think we always talk about like when brands approach an organization, a company like yours, and wanting to reach your demographic. Can you expand on what is the best case scenario? Like, how does a brand approach your team in a way that is thoughtful? Like, what does that look like? Because I think sometimes we say it, but the person on the outside doesn't know what that sounds like or what that needs to look like, and all these things. So can you expand on that a little bit?
I think it starts with the approach, and like whether it comes from a genuine place of interest and care. And I don't think it's quite rare actually. And there's probably like maybe one or two instances where we felt like it's been done like that.
And can you give us an example of, because at the end of the day, like a brand wants, it's a business, right? Like a company is coming to you because we want to reach the demographic that you serve, and we want to reach these women, these people. How does a brand do that in a way that is, what's the right way to do it?
I think it's best when they come to us with more of an open brief, and then we can suggest what we would like to do, and that way it's more of an authentic representation or authentic kind of response to that.
Yeah.
Rather than it being like, hey, we've got this thing, you guys might fit into it. How would you interpret that?
Yeah. I think with that brief as well, like the intention of the organization always comes across within the brief. So if your brief is extremely focused on extracting from us, rather it's kind of like, if your intention is to actually create a platform and bring these people in, then we can tell. Or if your brief is simply just for the hype or for the tokenization, we can tell. Like the intention always is really visible in the brief.
Like for example, they might be like, okay, we've got this new shoe release. We want you guys to make something surrounding this shoe release. and we want £3. We want to give you £3 to do this. Like no money whatsoever. And then we're supposed to be able to pay ourselves, the talent, the, people behind the camera and behind the scenes. And that you can always tell that the intentions are not, in the right place, because it's not thinking about the people involved properly. It's not coming from a place of care, where if it comes the other way around and they are inviting you to create something, it's a different exchange, I think.
Thank you.
So bigger budgets, open brief, and more conversation.
Yes. And also like willingness to listen if we have something to suggest to them, I think is always great.
Curiosity, openness, and trust, right? Because you know what you're doing, you know your community, and you're trusted by that community as well. Anyone else have a question? Over there on the top left.
Okay, a bit of an odd one. In an ideal world, if money wasn't an issue and you guys reached a state where you could create what you wanted, would you actively seek out brands to work with? And do you think that's a no?
No. Unless they want to give us like things to shoot with. In that case, great, but yeah, probably not.
In an ideal world, we would all be free and we'd be living on a farm
Not
and
that
just
ideal.
sunbathing.
Freedom.
A little back, you're still on your journey and going towards that, but would you be seeking out brands, or are they necessary for you to fund the platform that you're creating?
I think at the moment there are quite limited channels for us to make money from, and the collaborations with the brands at the moment, unfortunately, is one of those. So in an ideal world, we would cut that out, but unfortunately for now, this is the way we have to do some of it.
But also, it's not to say that every brand
yeah,
can't be worked with.
true.
Like, there are lots of incredible organizations who align with us in terms of ethics and values. And collaboration is amazing. That's not something we are against. But
Yeah.
again, it depends on the brand and the intent.
And sometimes working with these larger like brands almost give you a platform to create and reach more people. So sometimes it's not always a negative thing. You could make something incredible in partnership with somebody that has given you the trust to do it. So yeah, it's not always a negative. So maybe no, actually. I'll take that back.
Thank you.
One more over here.
So my question is, so if you were to remove those brand collaborations and they're paying you for this, where would the money come from to like sustain your magazine and all these events that you do? How would
Good question.
Because I work in fashion and I'm always curious about how I can make money out of my career, because most of the time I don't get paid for the stuff that I do, and I'm always curious how magazines and I guess people can keep sustaining what they love to do, but while making good money and having a good lifestyle.
Honestly, we always say that if we didn't have the agency, we wouldn't still be going. Because as a magazine on its own, not just Azeema, even a lot of the other magazines we've worked with, bigger magazines, there's no money. It's so expensive to make. There's no money. And there's so many of them are closing, and it's really, really sad.
Mm.
So do you have any ideas where...
I think maybe like... I guess maybe in an ideal world, it would be non-transactional collaborations or support, non-transactional support, being given maybe the finances and the tools to create what we have always wanted to create. But I don't know if that even is a
No, it's
possibility.
okay.
It's kind of wishful thinking a little bit, I think.
understand.
There's like funding, like grants and stuff, and also investors. But at the same time, with investment, there's a lot of limitations, I guess, and
barriers.
shifting
of course,
control.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Over here, Hakam. Sorry, I just want to pass the mic on to someone who hasn't spoken.
Thank you. There's a little part that you mentioned that brands come to you for the part where you have your own community. So talk about how important it is that you have your own like tribe, or let's say gang of people that always show up and they subscribe to the soul of what you do, not just the product that you put. How important that is.
I mean, it's super important. I think we wouldn't have anything to make otherwise, you know, like, and it's amazing that people encourage us to keep going. So,
I mean, Azeema is the community, you know. There's like we've said, like it's a constant exchange, it's a constant collaboration with the community. We bring them in every single project that we do, whether it's behind the scenes, in front of the camera, in the magazine, and at the parties, DJing, in the workshops, leading the workshops, recommendations. You know,
I'd say
in every little facet that
it's
could
central.
exist. Yeah, it's so central.
But what's really special about Azeema as well is that we kind of sit across multiple cultures and communities. I guess this is kind of related to the topic of the talk, but there's a lot of kind of collectives and platforms that kind of specifically focus on one community, which is amazing because it's their community. But with Azeema, we try and kind of be as inclusive as possible. Which is amazing for the community because everyone feels represented and heard and everything. But at the same time, then there's sometimes brands see that we're our demographic is too wide, so they're like, oh, we don't know which bit they fit into, like, or they're not Muslim enough to be part of our Muslim campaigns, or they're not like, do you know what I mean, black enough to be, So I think there's amazing parts of it because it's so inclusive for the community, but at the same time, there's challenges.
Unfortunately, we do have to wrap up, but how long are you here? What are you doing in the next few days? What are you checking out? And where can people find you? We'll go around, like, one by one.
I mean, we're here for the whole of Seoul, so we'll be around. If you see us, like, please come and chat to us. You can find us at Azeema Mag on Instagram and azeemamag.com.
And what are you checking out at Seoul or elsewhere in the UAE?
I'm here for Coco Rocco.
Yes.
Sunday night.
And I'm shopping at Shabab.
Yes.
So we'll see you
Shabab.
at their booth.
And if you're around on Sunday, me and Sanaya are going to be DJing in
1:30 is early, so everyone please don't be
please,
tired.
Please come.
Mark your calendars. Thank you so much.
And
Stick
thank you,
around for the
Butheina.
next
Thank
talk.
you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.